Hello there. What is going on, YouTubers? I kind of been planning to make this video for a while, and here at long last, I feel fully prepared, and well, as I made the GIF file in and have it embedded onto the OBS application here. So yeah, so it's the 21st of June, year 2025 at Australian Eastern Standard Time, and still the 20th of June, year 2025 at local Beijing time. So during this filming session, I would like to, kind of reassure you guys about the fact that you don't need to be, you don't need to get so sad or so upset or depressed at your inability or your incompetence in making a change to your current circumstance or situation. Well, specifically, for those who have got themselves or have got ourselves, ourselves, stranded at either your parents' residence or flats or house, or even or in my case, at my grandma's flat for quite several years. Well, at least most of the time, ever since I had to drop out from the University of Sydney, and still, well, I know it is certainly more than just frustrating and hugely disappointing, even upsetting and depressing, to have remained stranded, stuck at the same spot for such a long period of time, not being able, to make more money, not being able to travel to new places and broaden our horizons, and see new things, acquire new knowledge and experiences. It is quite a pain in the ass, and but you don't actually have to say divert your precious time and energy onto feeling upset or frustrated or depressed, but instead look for methodologies to make breakthroughs, if not necessarily a major comeback, in your life. And on the bright side, you get to save a huge ton of money spent or about to be spent on rent, just to make your would be landlords um even richer in that case. And do bear in mind that a dollar saved counts as a dollar earned. And unless you manage to save every dollar, every penny you earn, you haven't actually saved any money. Well, technically speaking, yes. Well, unless you manage to have save it and put it to good use, to the to use to use it in a way that makes your life more fulfilling and more enjoyable. And that's certainly discount having to pay rent out of the equation. And not to mention that all the other um, expenses that may come with having to pay rent somewhere else, say, not just in a foreign land, but, in, say, in another city, in another region or area, or even just in another district within the same city. There can, be some other, say, other sorts of overheads, like, say, yeah, train, 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 train tickets or bus that you have to catch as a way of commute to, say, to your workplace, that you have to go back go back and forth as the main spot of your 9 to 5 grind, and blah blah blah. And not to mention other sorts of costs that's associated with your 9 to 5 grind, or a 9 to 5 grind in the conventional sense. If you do not take or if you do not catch a public transport as the main way of commuting, then you will have to pay for gas for your vehicle, for your own vehicle, say a car or a truck, or maybe in some rare cases you have your own limousine or blah blah blah, and other sorts of maintenance costs, say having to pump more air into your tires, or having to patch up the tires, having to repair, make major repairs or retrofits, or even sometimes a complete overhaul on your vehicle from time to time. Since it doesn't last forever. At least for for most of its parts and accessories, they tend to decay and rot or degenerate, disintegrate over time. Well, but I suppose it applies such constant applies such universal constant pretty much applies to each and every physical entity in the whole universe. So don't feel too sad about it. And on the other hand, about parents, about the harsh and cruel fact that parents just keep reproducing, just keep bringing more innocent children into this cruel and brutal and hostile meat grinder we call or generally refer to as the Matrix. Since we can't force everybody on planet Earth to stop reproducing, unless one of us happens to become say a world leader or a politician that holds virtually unlimited level or amount and range of political sway or power to kind of implement legislation that, unless you have good reasons and solid and stable or a decent amount of income, and you have a good character, you pass their systems of scrutinizing your parenting style or your to test whether your character fits for being a parent, that sort of thing. Yeah, unless one of us happens to have acquired a major share of the political power or influence amongst say the Illuminati or the Freemasonry or blah blah blah, or the the sort of shadow regime that runs the show behind the scene. Unless one of us becomes one of them, and actually has the determination to make it happen, then none of us can stop humanity from lust, from having to reproduce and shit, blah blah blah. So as a result of such, maybe you should start treating your parents as a living AATM, a living automatic telling machine. But you can't make it so obvious or blatant that they sense or start to realize that you are using them as and ATM. But instead, you need to do it subtly, do it with some subtlety, and try to say use your charm, your charisma to indoctrinate your parents into believing that they need to send you, to constantly or regularly send you financial aid or financial support with good reasons. Say you kind of say pretend to date a certain girl or a certain a certain man or blah blah blah, and you make it, or even if, well, in actuality, technically speaking, you aren't, but you have the ability, to pretend as if you are date, dating someone, and need some money, to maybe in the future get married or blah blah blah, in the eyes of your parents. And that's I'm just making something up here, so don't get it twisted, or apply the method, the example method I gave you blindly, and and then ruin the so-called trust or of bond of affection between you and your parents. So don't try this blindly, without a plan, without taking the time to tailor or customize the fundamental methodology accordingly to your own needs and wants and personal circumstance, and blah blah blah. Just whatever happens in any event, just bear in mind that even the so-called love, the so-called bond or bonds of affection between parents and children or offsprings are still at least from a logical and evolutionary scientific point of view, still a transactional relationship. Even a relationship of rivalry, competition, competition still, even competition still occurs between parents and offsprings, right from the start of conception. Since as a fetus, you pretty much live as a parasite within your mother's womb, constantly extracting and demanding more and more resources, more nutrients from your mother during the whole process of pregnancy. And there are that's what's called something scientifically speaking, it's called the maternal fetal conflict, that exists between a fetus and a mother, and it occurs to and applies to each and every circumstance in which a woman begins to conceive a child or children. And after birth, you are still competing with your parents for resources, for namely for money, for water, for food, for living space or slash habitat. And this process, this rivalry, even war, just never stops until one party dies. So don't take don't even think about the very existence of love, a single strand, a single molecule, or even single atom, a single subatomic particle of love that can still somehow exist between parents and children. Even siblings fight with one another for for money, for inheritance, or in case of a monarchy, heirs, many offsprings of a king or a queen or an emperor just keep fighting for the title of the heir apparent, yeah, in order to succeed the throne. So I doubt at this point I just I no longer believe in the notion of love or true love, at least in the conventional sense. Well, not at least amongst those NPCs, those normies, those that blindly and mindlessly follow the conventional pattern of life and death. But maybe I suppose I still kind of believe in the so-called brotherly love or bromance, since I do kind of genuinely admire other men who share similar, if not identical, values and philosophies with me, and do a lot better and achieve a lot more than I do, and wish to learn from them and grow and evolve together as a whole, as brothers in arms and blah blah blah, so long and so forth. So yeah, to in any event, to summarize, stop taking your parents so seriously. Stop taking life so seriously. Just take your own well-being seriously. That's I suppose the only thing you should take seriously. Say, um, to put it more specifically, you should never ever trade your health. Your say that can include both your mental health and your physical health for money, for fame, for status, or for simple admiration or approval from others. You know, but maybe you can still kind of trade your health, well, at least maybe your mental health for some physical ple- pleasure once in a while, and say namely you know ingesting or feeding upon those sort of illicit drugs. But I do not encourage you to do so. But even if you do it, I won't stop you. And I do sympathize and um, empathize with you for doing drugs, just for the sake of dulling or numbing your pain as a result of having to deal with and live this life we never asked for, we never consented to. So yeah. Um, so in other words, treat life itself as a transaction. Treat pretty much everything and the so-called bonds and relations with everyone as a transaction. Though I'm not saying all transactions result in undesirable or unpleasant or even catastrophic outcomes, since transactions, transactions necessitate consent, mutual consent most of the time, and that says, generally speaking, it often leads to a mutually beneficial arrangement and outcome. So yeah, just live your life to the fullest while you seek opportunities to make breakthroughs from your current shitty situations. And I believe sooner or later we do get the we will get the chance to make a major comeback in our lives sooner or later, but only if we in we learn to embrace Zen, embrace solipsism, no matter how much fire and shite life, and parents throw at us. So yeah, I believe, yes, I have talked enough for this filming session. And in case you have found you have found this video helpful or useful, if not also enjoyable, please consider smashing that like button, so that um you know so that lady algorithm or harlot algorithm can grant my channel more favors, and thus motivating me to bring you guys more quality videos and other forms of exclusive contents along the journey or voyage or adventure of this shitty life. So yeah, in any regards or in any event, take care, stay out of trouble, and stay far from weak, because we are far from weak. So yeah, and thank you again for watching and being with me to the end. Stay out of trouble and stay far from weak. Take care. Bye. Good night or good day. Cheers.